Hey, what's up guys? So big news with the Escort Redline 360c. Escort has finally released a long-awaited and much-needed improvement here for the Detector in terms of a new firmware update that helps to address the issues that we've long seen here with the Detector when it comes to performance and aero transitions, etc. Now, this new update is now available and it helps to improve the response time against both instant-on and quick trigger. We've got some improvements to the false alert filtering. We've got some improvements to the aero transitions as you pass a source, etc. Now, there's a lot of information that's now available online, and now that the firmware update is available, a lot of people have started testing this new update. Now, I've been on vacation here for the past couple weeks, and now that I'm back, I'm going to go ahead and go out and do some testing here on my own. However, in the meantime, Escort has also published a white paper that details pretty extensively not only their testing methodology, but also their detailed improvements as far as what we're seeing now with this new version of this detector. And so with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at all the new improvements here with this latest update for the Redline 360c. Now, diving into all the improvements, Escort's actually posted a full change log over on the forums. And if we take a look at the full list of improvements here, the first one they mentioned is going to be improved response time here. It's going to apply to all three bands, X, K, and KA. Notably, they've also improved the KA band response time when you're running the detector in KA wide, meaning we're no longer going to actually have to segment the detector to make it more quick and responsive. They've also made some improvements here to pop mode detection, but personally, I don't really care about that, but I'll test it nonetheless. They made some improvements also to the aero transition times. This is a big deal, which should make it much easier to actually identify the location of the sources as you're passing them. They've made some improvements to the blind spot filtering, which they also call the collision avoidance systems, and also like the full tilt K-band alerts, which has been an issue for years now with various Escorts. It looks like that has been improved here as well. They've also made some improvements here for OnStar, mobile hotspot users, if you're using their like in-car Wi-Fi for the Wi-Fi capabilities of the detector. And then finally, there's also a new option here for K-band filter. So you can toggle the filtering on and off the way you can do with a lot of the other detectors to get either, faster response times if you want, or fewer K-band false alerts. And the default setting is going to be with the K-band filter on. You can always turn it off if you like. And this is going to be separate from the K-notch filter, which we've had previously. And then they also mentioned that this K-band filter is only going to affect K-band. The Ka-band response time is not going to be affected by the K-band filter, which makes sense. Now, there's also a second post here in the forums with a white paper that I want to check out that goes into a lot of information here about these improvements. And in the white paper, they go over not only their testing methodology here with this latest update, but also the exact test results they've done, both in the lab here like this, as well as out on the road in the real world. And in this white paper, they've discussed things like the new response time capabilities, the new detector's sensitivity or its range, the false alert filtering, things like the RDD immunity, the aero transition improvements, etc. And you can, of course, read over all their details as far as how they're doing their testing. And they've got a lot of good information here with their equipment that they're using, as well as the different settings that they're testing with here as well. And then starting off here first with response time testing, specifically against instant on, they've done some testing here with K-band, and then a KA on 33.8, 34.7, and 35.5. They're going to be testing with the Escort Redline 360c with this new firmware, as well as two different competitors. Now, they don't actually name the exact detectors here, but looking over all the data, it looks like this first one here is going to be the Uniden, like an R8 or an R8W or something. And then the second one looks to be the V1 Gen 2. And against instant on, what we're looking at is basically how long it takes between when the radar gun starts transmitting and then when the detector starts to alert. And taking a look at the different results here with the Escort, we're down under 1/3 of a second here for how long it takes to actually hear the alert once the gun starts transmitting. If we take a look at the Unidens, we're again around 1/3 of a second or so. The 35.5 does take a little bit longer, closer to 1/2 a second or a little bit more. And the V1 is around 1/3 of a second or so for all of the different frequency ranges. And again, it's also worth noting that this testing was done here with KA super wide with no band segmentation. Traditionally with the Escorts, they're very slow with KA super wide and you really do have to segment, but it looks like that's no longer the case. We're now getting really nice, fast, snappy response times, even when it's scanning all of KA band. Taking a look at the settings again, looks like we're at KA wide here, so scanning all of KA band, we're not segmented or anything. And then they're also doing things like turning off TSR, which can introduce some delays specifically on K band. Next, we can take a look at some of their results here, testing sensitivity and range. And first, they're going to be doing some lab testing here Though with lab testing, we do kind of find it could be kind of hit or miss, specifically with the Escorts because of its dynamic adjustments of the noise floor in really quiet environments. It can make the detector more sensitive. And so it may do better in the lab than it does in the real world where it's got a lot of noise it's dealing with. So it actually has to raise its noise floor and it's waiting for stronger signals in order to actually issue the alert. And so we have seen in the past, specifically again with the Escorts, that the results in the real world might be different than what we see in the lab. But nevertheless, let's dive into it. And the way they're doing the testing here in the lab is they're basically starting with a really weak signal, and then they're increasing the signal by 1 dB every 3 seconds until the detector actually alerts for a minimum of 4 seconds. And then taking a look at the results here, it looks like the results are going to be pretty comparable here for all the different detectors. You can see the differences here are going to be what, 3%, 1% or so. One of the biggest differences looks like it was 7% here against competitor 2. That one, I believe, is going to be with the Falcon HR. We know there is a bit of a weakness here with the V1 Gen 2 against that specific gun, so that one does make sense. But for the most part, there's not a huge difference here in sensitivity in the lab between the Escort, the Uniden, and the V1, and this applies both to the front and to the rear. And I mean, that makes sense. They're all very sensitive detectors, and honestly, sensitivity is not really the main reason to like choose one of these detectors over another. Nevertheless, they also went out and did some road testing here with all the different detectors as well, with the radar gun set up on one side and then just driving towards the radar gun and then just seeing how long it takes for the different detectors to alert. And it looks like their test course was about 1.3 miles in length, and there are some elevation changes here as well. And if we take a look at their test results here, we'll start here first on K-band with the Falcon HR. Looks like a lot of detectors are alerting just under 1 mile away. The red line was a little bit farther away than the Uniden and the V1, so good job there, Escort. On 35.5, let's see, all the detectors are alerting a little bit over a mile. We've got the Uniden here, the Escort did a little bit better, and then the Valentine better still. And then on 34.7, they're all around 1.1 miles plus minus or so. So we've got the Uniden here, the Escort, and the V1. And then on the B3, which actually is traditionally where we see the strongest performance out of the Escorts, they're all right around 1.2 miles. And this kind of stuff I found can really vary. They do publish the standard deviation here, which is nice, but the results can vary based on terrain, on the course, on traffic, on weather, on all that kind of stuff. And so you can take the same detectors on different courses, and sometimes one detector does a little bit better or the other one does. And so like there's a lot of variances here, but either way, they're all actually doing really, really well here on this specific course. And again, this isn't really one reason to choose one detector over another, but it's good to see that the Escort is still giving us a nice long-range performance. That wasn't an issue before, but it's nice to see that it's still giving us good performance here in terms of range, even with this latest update. Then when it comes to the arrow performance, it looks like they've done some directional signal analysis, basically passing a radar source, and they found that now we get nearly instantaneous directional transitions when you pass a radar gun. I know there were a lot of complaints about that with the previous firmware, so it's nice to see that they've improved that here as well. Next, taking a look at false alert filtering, they're basically doing some road testing, driving over the same course here over the course of several days with different detectors and just recording how many false alerts they see. And if we take a look here, over the 5 different days, they're logging it here with the Escort, the Uniden, and the V1. And what they're reporting here is it looks like the Uniden is actually giving more false alerts than the Escort overall. This does go down over time as the lockouts start to kick in. So you'll see like with the Escort, it starts off with 20 alerts. And then after a while, usually by like day 3 or so, we see lockouts kicking in. So you're getting fewer alerts. The same is going to apply here with the Uniden, so 30, 25, 20 or so. The V1, that's not going to apply, so we're around 20 false alerts here, and it stays 17 to 20 every single day. So clearly they're testing it without any sort of apps to add the GPS lockout functionality. They're testing it just with the detector. It's also worth noting here that the Escort has a new K-band filter, which you can turn on and off. And it sounds like here with all of the different detectors, they're trying to keep the settings constant here. And so the K-notch filters, the band settings, the filtering and everything is going to be set up similarly here to the Escort. Now, I think this could actually be an issue because turning off the K-band filter on the Unidens and the V1 is kind of unfair. Nobody actually does that. And I'm not saying this in defense of the Uniden or the Valentine, it's just you kind of need those filters for a blind spot filtering, you know? And there's very rare instances where you might want to turn that off against maybe some like photo radar guns or something to optimize against those. But if you're turning off the K-band filtering to deal with the blind spot filtering, you're going to be getting a lot more false alerts. And so for that reason, I would actually expect with that filter turned on for these other detectors to actually false less. It's cool that Escort has some filtering with that feature turned off, but I think for more realistic real-world tests, we would like to see the results with the K-band filter turned on here on all of the different detectors. Additionally, they mentioned that they've got their K-notch turned on, and they only have one K-notch for around 24.199-ish or so for your like Hondas and Acuras, and they're trying to do like similar settings here for all the detectors. The Unitons, again, you've got a bunch of different K-notches, and so it's not clear, like, did they change the Unitons' default K-notches to mirror the Escort, like turning off some of the Mazda CX-5 ones, or did they leave it at default settings? So it's a little unclear as far as like how this exact testing was done. And to get some clarification, I actually asked about this over on the forums about like the K filters and the K notches, so we can learn a little bit more. So I think this might be the only thing that's a little questionable at this point. But again, we're gonna have to do more testing to really see how all this stuff fares. And then lastly, they've also done some testing here with radar detector detectors like the Spectre. They mentioned that they've actually tested with 3 different models of the Spectre RDD. And what they found here with the Redline, the Uniton, and the V1 is very similar to what I've seen here in my testing. So basically they're getting, the Redline is gonna be fully stealth here against the Spectre, makes sense. Same thing here with the V1 Gen 2, though the Uniton detectors are detectable here at close range. And so if you're looking for the maximum level of RDD immunity, the Unitons are gonna be detectable, while the Redline and the V1 Gen 2 are gonna be better. And so based on these test results here from Escort, things are actually looking really good. We're seeing really good response time against both IO and QT, even with the detector scanning all of Ka-band without needing to segment. We've got improved false alert filtering, though this is still going to be kind of questionable. We're going to have to test to see how well this actually works in practice, especially with the K-band filter turned on, and how viable it is with that filter turned off. It looks like the aero transitions have been improved, which is great, that was really important. And it looks like the long-range performance is still good, just like it was before. Now that said, to some extent we need to take this testing, of course, with a grain of salt because it's from the manufacturer, but nevertheless, we have some other people in the forums who've also started sharing their test results and experiences, and so far their findings are actually pretty good as well. And now that I'm back from vacation, I can go ahead and start resuming my own testing here as well, and I'll share the results with you guys later this week after I conclude everything. And assuming everything looks good here, I'd say that there's 2 main questions. Number 1, would I recommend the Redline based on the new firmware? And based on what I can see so far, yes, it looks like they've been addressing a lot of the key issues, especially in terms of like response time stuff. The aero transition has been improved, and I'll double check stuff with like the Decatur Genesis guns to make sure that it can respond correctly to those guns here as well. And then the second thing is like, assuming I would be comfortable recommending it again, then, well, how would it compare to detectors like the R8W? You know, what's the best detector? I think that's going to take a little bit of time to like process everything and think about the dynamics of how everything fits together, but I'd say there's definitely a possibility for perhaps including the Redline as maybe being the best detector out there. We'll have to wait and see. Unit has been making some improvements, but I haven't been a huge fan of some of the latest firmware updates, like the laser jammer stuff is still kind of broken and not being addressed, so there's still kind of like more stuff to figure out and think about, but nevertheless, we're going to have to take an updated look now to see how everything stacks up and fits together. So definitely stay tuned for that. And then finally, these firmware updates are also going to be coming to a lot of Escort's other Blackfin series detectors, like the Max 360c, for example, the Max Cam, as well as the custom installed Redline CI 360c. And Escort has mentioned kind of the order they're expecting to release these firmware updates, though they haven't given any dates or timelines yet as far as when these updates will be rolling out. But it's good to see that they're going to be releasing these same updates here for the other Blackfin series detectors as well. And so over on the forums, we're kind of discussing our thoughts here with this, and we're sharing our test results as well. A lot of us are all starting to test. So make sure you head on over to the forums for more information and discussion about this. I'll have links to all the different stuff down below, as well as links to the firmware updates, to the different detectors that are going to be getting updated, etc. And of course, stay tuned for my own test results. Make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell to get notified for when my test results go live as well. So a lot of interesting stuff to take a look at here, and a good job to Escort. I know this is something they've been working on for quite a while. It's not like a quick snap release, and so I'm really glad to see that finally we have this update. And they've been taking these issues very seriously and basically giving us the performance that we would expect from a high-end flagship detector like this at a high-end price point with higher-end hardware. This is closer to what I would expect here from a high-end detector, and it looks like Escort is finally delivering. And so I'm curious to see kind of like people's impressions and thoughts not only on the detector, but on Escort as a company. Does this, say, make people more interested in picking up the detector again? I'm really curious to see like how all those dynamics play out as well. But either way, there's kind of a discussion as far as all the improvements and updates, and more information in the description, as always. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you're all doing great, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.